Thank you. Welcome everybody to our regular meeting of council. We have on our
Oh, mine's on.
now it's on. Thank you. A little technical glitch there. We have on the top of every agenda an acknowledgement on regarding the land on which we gather here, having been and currently the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples, Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt. And we recognize their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. There's also a warning about video. There's a video camera behind. We're live streaming and they are archived. Excuse me. We have an amended agenda. I don't think we need to approve that agenda under the circumstances. Thank you. And our colleague, Councillor Zelka, has advised us he's not well tonight, so he's unable to attend. So we have 3 sets of minutes. Can we put all those in one lump and approve them all?
Move approval.
Move approval. That's Council April 10th, Committee of the Whole April 18th, and Special Council April 5th. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. I have remarks in 3 areas. The first has to do with a letter we received. You may recall that at UBCM in Victoria in September, we requested a meeting about derelict boats. We were supposed to meet with the Minister of Lands, Forest and Natural Resources. He was unavailable, so we were asked to meet with the Minister of Transport, Todd Stone, instead. And I think actually, I think all of council may have been there, almost 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 of us. And we made several requests in terms of derelict boats, in particular consideration being given to a program which recognizes that these boats, which are purchased by consumers at some point, are going to have to come to the end of their useful life, and how do you deal with that and who pays? So that was in September. March 31st, and this is the first meeting that I've been able to advise you of this, we received a letter from Mr. Todd Stone, the Minister, the Honourable Todd Stone, in which he said that following our meeting, he's asked ministry staff to follow up directly with our staff regarding and looking at possible ways the ministry can assist local governments and their partners to address the matters of derelict and abandoned boats. Now, I understand that there have been very brief contacts between provincial staff and our staff. Ms. Koenig, can you just update us the nature of those contacts?
I can, Your Worship. We had a couple of weeks ago conversation with one of the senior staff at Ministry of Environment to potentially set up a meeting between Mayor, Council, the Minister and senior staff at the Ministry of Environment. But with the pending, of course, provincial election, it was suggested that we contact them ASAP after the election to set that meeting up so that we can continue the correspondence.
Okay. And so that's something that Ms. Koenig and I have discussed, and I anticipate setting that meeting up once the ministers are named, and also including our MLA in that, because there seemed to have been some disconnect in terms of information about our MLA, not knowing that we had had all of these prior meetings with the ministers and had been urging all along, so we hadn't stood still on that agenda. So in the second item I'll bring you up to date on is along the same lines. You may recall some of you attended AVICC, and there was a particular workshop symposium to do with derelict boats again, and there was talk there about a private member's bill being put before the House of Commons. That was done on the 13th of April. It's known as Bill C-352, and there's a number of key points, and this was put forward by Island MP Sheila Malcolmson, and it would achieve four things. It would designate the Canadian Coast Guard as the agency responsible for directing the removal and recycling of abandoned vessels, and that's a big issue, the recycling part. Secondly, it would build a coast-wide strategy of collaboration between provincial and local and the federal governments. Thirdly, it would get, as quote, get taxpayers off the hook by improving vessel registration so the actual responsible owner can be identified. And fourthly, it would prevent vessels from becoming hazards by piloting a turn-in program and supporting local maritime salvage businesses. So that is a private member's bill, and very few, if any, get through. But that argument is being made, and I know some of you attended prior meetings with ministry staff, ministers, I should say, at UBCM when actually Ms. Malcolmson was the equivalent of a local councillor for the Islands Trust. So she's continued to carry that agenda, and we're very grateful to her for doing that, and hopefully that will go a long way to solving the issues. Thirdly, on your behalf and our community's behalf, I attended Yom HaShoah, which was a commemorative event on the Sunday, which was a Holocaust Remembrance Day. I can tell you we heard a number of songs and speakers, but the one that stood out in my mind was a survivor's story. He was about 3 years old when his parents were taken away from him in Holland, and his parents were murdered and became part of the 6 million Jews that were killed in the Second World War by the regime. And it was very compelling, very moving. And it led to later on in the program something I think that's apropos about what we've heard here in our council chambers and also at AVICC, the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, about respect and support. And as part of an earlier commemorative Holocaust Commemoration Day or Remembrance Day, a pledge of mutual respect and support had been developed, and then read out and to be read out at these events. And I think I'm going to read it out here because of its importance, I think, not only to all of us as a culture, but as part of the international community, but it really also resonates at what we do and how we do our work. So it says 3 lines, and I'll read them. Silence in the face of injustice is to agree with the ones who perpetuate injustices. Never will we stand by to allow expressions of racism, xenophobia, or discrimination against any peoples in our community. We will do our utmost to encourage meaningful dialogue and positive action to foster understanding among diverse groups based on mutual respect. So again, I was honored to be invited to the ceremony. There was an MP, MLAs, and other local politicians there as part of the remembrance event. Okay, I move on now. That was item number 4 on our agenda. I move on to public participation period. Before I go through this, what the rules are, let's just see if there's anyone here who is intending to speak during the public participation period. Okay, so I will go through. Marion, just if you just wait for a second. This is a 20-minute period. Each speaker gets 3 minutes. I time it on my iPhone, and when the beeper goes, I ask speakers to wrap up. I start the timing when I formally welcome the speaker. I remind you to state your name, the community that you reside in, and then also, if you wouldn't mind printing your name and your municipality on the sheet that's at the podium, and address all comments through me, please. So, um, welcome.
Thank you. And I have a request related to affordable housing. And I'd like to emphasize that Oak Bay is, thank you, fast losing affordable housing. And new structures are replacing older ones that used to be affordable. I'd like to request the council direct staff to study creative ways of making housing more accessible financially. Steps are being discussed in some municipalities to discourage homes and units being left empty in a real estate market rife with speculation. The City of Victoria is poised to impose a tax on foreign home buyers. Some communities require that a percentage of units in a building be rented at below market rates. Apartment units can be scattered throughout a condo building in order not to marginalize the renters. This should be insisted upon for Abstract's proposed Bowker condo development. A home care program could be organized in ways that help seniors remain in their homes. For several years, I've implemented an informal version whereby companionable tenants pay a modest rent, and in exchange they help with gardening and cooking and grocery shopping, and it's worked very, very well. An opinion piece in today's editorial section of the Globe and Mail draws attention to the growing gap between rich and poor in Canada and our housing crisis, also echoed in various forms throughout the world. Oak Bay has no detectable slums, yet about 3 years ago I twice discovered a homeless person sleeping in a sheltered spot outside the municipal hall after I left a council meeting. Let us resist being considered a haven for the 1% and the upper middle class, and let's take creative steps to alleviate poverty. I wanted to bring this up before the public hearing coming up in May in relation to the condo proposal. So I do hope you'll give consideration to the staff looking into some of these alternative possibilities.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well,
now
thank you.
You have filed document here. Perhaps we can add that to the Bowker Cadboro Bay public hearing agenda. So it'll be on that agenda, Ms. Cummings. Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak to us? Okay, thank you very much. Move on to item number 6, which is that very project of which you addressed, Ms. Cummings. And we have a memo dated the 20th of April from Deborah Jensen, our manager of planning. Deals with a number of issues, so I'm going to just ask her to introduce it at a high level. Also, Mr. Haran is here should we have any questions, and Mr. Hyde-Lay is also here. So we have all of the experts that we need on these issues that were raised by Ms. Jensen. Please proceed, Ms. Jensen.
Certainly. As Council may recall, they had requested staff provide additional information with respect to the tree canopy at the proposed site for development at Bowker and Cadboro Bay Road. The applicants have since provided additional information regarding that canopy cover, both for existing, proposed, and what would be considered to be on-site and off-street tree canopy. Those specific numbers are provided in the memo under consideration by Council. If you require additional information, we do have the applicant here this evening who could provide you additional detail on that. In addition, we just wanted to advise Council that the engineering department has been involved in discussions with the applicant regarding the off-site agreement. That has reached agreement, And we've also been reviewing the covenants under proposal for consideration before adoption of the bylaw to do with the use of the strata, respecting rental tenancy, age discrimination, and ensuring their public right-of-way and restaurant use in the building itself.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Let's see if there's any questions from council on the memorandum. I know one councillor has a question that goes beyond the memorandum, and I think given that that this will be the last meeting before the public hearing, I'm going to allow some latitude in going beyond the agenda item, because really the agenda item is fairly focused, but I will allow it to go beyond. So let's see if there's any questions, and we have the three staff here who can talk about engineering, trees, and planning. Councillor Kirby, please.
Thank you.
And then next, Councillor Ney after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding memo attachment 3, the tree canopy drawings, and the difference in the drawings between. I'm just confused as to why some of them are marked in green and as a planting area, and some of them are marked in they're just gray and they appear to be trees or plantings, but they aren't colored. I didn't catch the difference between those two. If somebody could answer that, I'm not sure whether I should address that to staff or to the applicant on the Murdoch de Grief.
Yep. No, I see not the applicant coming forward. So if you could just introduce yourself, but pull up the microphone first, and if you don't mind, and if you're a person whose name we already know how to spell, we
Hopefully it's a name you spell. My name's Scott Murdoch.
Okay. Well,
Same
we got
spelling.
that one beat.
I'm the landscape architect.
No
On
relation?
the project. No relation. No.
Okay, just square.
Yeah. We had a couple of plans, and was it? Yes. So what we were looking at there were just the off-site trees. So what was within the public realm on that drawing, and I think that's the off-site tree plan. And so there's other trees that were on property on the parkade deck, but this was specifically about the trees in the boulevard, and in particular it was to show how we were achieving soil volumes. And one of the things in the boulevard that we were concentrating on was maximizing soil volumes, because trees, their size is dependent on soil volume. We can put a tree in a little planter with no soil, and it could be a species that can grow quite big, but without soil resources, it will just stagnate and it won't grow. So we concentrated on, and this was basically to show how we could do that. And it was more of a plan to say, this is the soil volumes we're talking about, here's how we're going to achieve that, and so that we can talk about growing big trees.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ney, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to staff, Mr. Heidley. First of all, thank you very much for working closely with the applicant to achieve this tree canopy, as I've understood the report, where you've been able to achieve a 15% tree canopy beyond what it currently exists. So the proposal will have 15% more tree canopy than currently exists, and for the offsite, 20% more, and it far exceeds what even you've got in the urban forest strategy report. So that is terrific news for this proposed application. My question to you has to do with what is the arrangement around the care of the plantings of these trees? Will that be built into is the applicant or the applicant going to take care of the management of the trees? Is it built into a covenant? And what happens if trees expire and they need to be replaced, how will that be dealt with?
Thank you, Councillor Renee. For the trees that will be on the private property, those will be the responsibility of I suppose, the Strata. For the trees outside on public land, those would revert to the municipality after a period of establishment, which is usually 1 to 2 years, to make sure that the trees are doing fine.
Okay, and can we guarantee that that number of trees will always be, will continue? Like if a tree wanes or isn't able to survive, will it be replaced in its early days? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think so. Those are some details that would need to have to be worked out, so I can't answer that specifically, but yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions then? All right, so question, Councillor Murdoch?
I'm next, okay. Just for my clarification to staff, there was a mention made there in the updates that there was a Strata plan update. Is that the Strata Act Section 242 pieces in terms of insisting on or dealing with rentals and so forth? Is that what that's coming back to us with?
That's correct. With the original report that we brought forward to council, it specified as a condition of rezoning that we would be looking to set up a covenant or a housing agreement that would not allow the Strata to prohibit rental accommodation within the building.
Okay, so that's it. There's no additional rental agreements being discussed here in terms of the approval process?
No.
Okay, thank you. And I just, in the staff report, it refers to the applicant report, coverage exceeds the 18% coverage set out in the district urban forest strategy policies. I believe is that meant to say 20%? And under the new draft that the multifamily is 20% coverage?
Yes, Councillor Murdoch.
There's just a little typo there. And then I have to say it looks good that the offsite and the boulevard maintenance agreements are coming together. So that's nice to see. And I guess I have a few questions to the applicant, if I may, and probably Mr. Murdoch is the right person to answer these, but I'm not sure who in the applicant group. First off, just a small thing, the second page of the same diagram that Councillor Kirby referred to, which is the tree canopy drawings, attachment number 3. Just in the index on there, or the legend, it refers to existing on-site trees with the dark green and existing off-site trees in light green, but the light green are all on-site and the dark green is all off-site. I'm just assuming those are swapped. The wording is just swapped accidentally there. Is there a terminology thing I'm not familiar with?
No, it's more, yeah, maybe it is a bit misleading. It's, I don't know, there's only a couple of trees that were actually off-site. I think what we were looking at was we had just colored all the trees green, that shape, and then we ghosted out a polygon just to show what was sort of on the site or how much of the canopy was on-site versus off-site. Mm-hmm. And I would say that, yeah, they should have been reversed there.
Okay, the numbers look correct in that the larger amount is on-site, the 610 square meters is on-site, and the off-site is 300, which looks like a smaller amount.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Sometimes when labels are reversed, sometimes the facts are reversed as well. I just wanted to make sure those are correct, so that's fine. That's just a clarification piece. And I guess the questions I had were just around, just making sure that the plantings are viable. And so if I could just ask a couple of questions, because sure. I'm not an expert at this, so I'm just going to try and clarify in my mind. I get in the urban forest report, their statement under soil states that more soil is better, but between 0.3 and 0.6 cubic meters per meter square of canopy is the minimum. It also talks about most trees having dense roots in the top 1 meter of soil, but they can be shallower or deeper depending on the availability of water. So I guess, in that 0.7 meter of depth, which is sort of between half and 3/4 of that, what they would describe as sort of the main root zone, I just want to make sure that we're talking here about an adequate amount of soil for these large trees to set deep roots, particularly for Gary oaks, which I understand can set some pretty deep roots down.
Yeah, and when we've said those depths, those are sort of like an average depth. So we know the structural soil cells are 600 because they're a structure, and we can put 2. And the other pits, like in the road planting areas, what we do is it'll be shallower near the curb because we can't undermine the structural integrity of the road or the curb, but we'll go deeper in the middle. So on average, it'll be 700, but in the middle, we might, if we can, we might be a little bit deeper than that, so up to 1 meter. And then even then, we still scarify the ground below that, so we just loosen it up a bit so roots can actually penetrate into that as well. And Gary Oaks are great at going deeper, so you know, they should have no problem exploiting the soil volume that we've created.
Okay, and because it's on an existing, what's a road right now, it'll have road base and so forth on that. So the plan is to get through all of that and down to the pieces below?
Yeah, we would be, I would say we'd be over, you know, about a meter deep, yeah.
So well into that, okay. Thank you very much. And the other question I have is just, there's a number of trees along the north face of the building, sort of, sorry, I have a few more questions. And it looks from the plans that those trees are very close to, sort of, you know, maybe 18, 24 inches from the face of that building. There's not gonna be any issues there with light, just being on the north side of that building, being that close by?
Sorry, the ones on Bowker, I'm sorry?
The ones on Bowker, sorry, yes.
The oak trees, so we've pushed the oak trees out further.
No, the maple trees, I guess.
The maple trees are vine maples, and they're actually a shade-tolerant tree. So where you find them is in the understory. And then what they do is they kind of grow up and they actually like the shade. So it's actually, we've chose that species for that location.
Yeah, it looked like an appropriate species. It just, I was just making sure, just asking these questions. And I just, the question I had was like, looking at the first of those 2 pages in the planting plan, I'm trying to get a sense, the scale of the trees being drawn, they're probably not, are they in scale to what the actual canopy cover is expected to be?
No, not to what they're expected. That would be, you know, maybe in 10 years. We're actually just getting some information now about how big they would actually be in sort of 50, 75, 100 years too. And so in about 50 years, that circle is actually bigger. In fact, the two trees that are in the on the Bowker frontage are almost touching at that time. So we've tried to figure out how they would grow and how big they would be. And you know, so obviously we don't plant them and they're not instantly big.
So these are about 10 foot or 10 year sort of approximate diameter?
I'd say about 10 years, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's nice to sort of, there's a theoretical of the tree canopy drawing, because I just moved those around and it looked like they cover maybe 25 or 30% of the boulevard at this time, according to what the diagrams look like. So,
Yeah.
Because I guess I just want to, again, clarification for what we're looking at approving here is this is that number, it's 231% of the urban forest 20% goal, which puts it at 46.25%. So really, the claim in this is based off of the soil volumes. So it's a calculation model as opposed to an actual tree canopy.
It is, but we're also looking at the tree canopy as well, and looking at the age of trees and as they grow, what kind of canopies they would achieve. And we were just working on it earlier this week, and it's in that sort of 50-year range. We meet the urban tree guide, what we're recommending or what we're suggesting it could be. But at the 100-year, you know, presuming that they keep growing, and we're not talking about them growing super, super fast. The trunks don't grow very quickly. You know, oaks are quite, you know, they're older for their size. But you know, even if we take it going to 100 years, they end up being substantially bigger than the guideline recommendation.
Okay, no, it's fair. I guess I'm always trying to get my head around. So in 10 years' time, we're looking probably more like 25% coverage, which is about the target, and in 50 years, maybe considerably more than that.
And in terms of the soil volume that we're talking about, I mean, I've been trying to think of other projects where we've gotten large soil volumes, and to be honest, there aren't a lot of them. This is one of the first that's ever gotten where we've been able to achieve these kinds of volumes. So probably the next best one that I know is the Atrium project down on Blanchard Street. And the planter on the front of Blanchard, those are only 7 cubic meters per tree. And at the time, that was substantial. And the planting bulges on the side, those are about 12 to 15 cubic meters. The difference here is that we've actually gone underneath the sidewalk to put soil under the sidewalk and join up to other areas. So substantially more invested in soil here than we actually were able to do at the atrium at the time.
Okay, I appreciate that. And that would be, again, that was sort of my question about how effective these are because of soil volumes. And I'll use like the one of the corner item D, area D. It's got an 8 square meter, or 8 cubic meter, sorry, area where the tree is planted, but then it's got another sort of soil gap and then a long strip. And I'm having a hard time imagining the roots following that, but you would maybe could educate that just to make sure that there's, it looks to me as a person standing here that it's probably adequate. I mean, there's 7 foot or so wide planting areas, quite substantial for a tree. But is that volume sort of representative of the amount required for that tree? And it sounds like from what you said that it is.
It is, and it's kind of funny because you would think like if you were to plant that tree, is it really gonna? But if you think tree roots are quite mobile and they're always looking for resources and they're very good at it. And if one will make it through that gap, and we can always, in fact, we're tweaking a little bit that I think that might actually flare a little bit more towards the tree. And if that's, once it gets in there, then those tree roots then grow and will exploit that area. There's been experiments where they've done these in rectangular things, and then they've gone and they've air spaded and removed all the soil, and then the tree basically comes out and it has used all that area. So that's why we want to make it as big as we can, and as much soil as we can.
Right, okay. And that's, again, based on the volume, that's the 350 square feet or so of canopy that would be expected there, which would be a fairly large Gary Oak, but
Yeah.
within the realm of that, okay. Yeah. And I think the last question I have is just, again, this just comes back to the calculations versus actual. Obviously, the majority of the on-site are being, there's a garage underneath it all, so there's dirt on top of the garage, and again, you have an average depth there. But when I did the quick looking at that, again, it's a volumetric measure. There's 625 square meters of garage roof, but there's like 730 square meters of canopy cover. So I'm just wondering if that's a very realistic expectation in terms of on-site coverage, if the entirety of the garage roof is covered in the piece, but the canopy is going to be larger than that. Or does that include some overhang or some other thing I don't understand?
That would include some overhang. I mean, it's like the trees grow over. We've tried to estimate the areas of the offsite. We obviously have the area of the onsite very clearly defined by property line, but the trees will go over property lines and things like that, as well as all the trees that are along the, I guess the edge closest to Cadboro Bay, and on the backside will be going over that edge as well.
Okay, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily an accurate representation, but it's not completely out of the realm of what the intention is here in terms of the canopy.
Yeah, and it's challenging for us because we're trying to apply a standard and do the best we can with the standard. We really appreciate that there actually is a number because it is tricky to do, and we have put a big effort into maximizing that soil volume, which I think is the key element of what we're trying to achieve.
And I guess there's no concerns here in terms of doing that in that enclosed sort of rooftop space. I know there's rain garden space and so forth, a lot of weight there and so forth. There's no concerns there from a membrane perspective or anything else long-term on that?
No. In fact, we've been working closely with structural engineers and the waterproofing side of things. The trees that are on the canopy or on the roof deck aren't, some of them tend to be closer to the edges, so they're closer to structural supports underneath, or they're not quite as large a tree. Like they're not Gary Oaks. That's why we don't have any on that deck. Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned that it would be good to do anything outside of that, like the thing I was talking, any other sort of additional things now, or should we let people have questions?
Let's do what's in the report, and ask questions on that, and then receive the report, and then I think we'll go to the next phase. And that
Fair
could
enough.
be questions unrelated to this, but related to the project. Thank you very much, Mr. Murdochs. Both of you. Oh, you might want to stay there. Councillor Croft may have questions of you too.
To you, Chair.
Councillor Croft, go ahead, please.
One of the things the advisory design panel suggested was retention of some of the existing trees, and I'm still not clear on what existing trees, if any, are going to be kept. You know, we've got 189 and 190 that are marked on here. Are those trees? So I'm just trying to get a feeling for what I can see what's going within the footprint, but it's on the perimeter that the question was raised previously, and I just want to have that clear in my head as to what trees are remaining from the original site and which are going. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just looking for tree 189. Oh, 189, yes. So those are the ones that are on the edge on Cadboro Bay. Yes, sorry, those are being retained. It's the...
No, I understand. I'm just wanting to be clear how many of these perimeter trees are being retained, because we're talking about, in the public is saying that there's 8 trees being removed and we are replacing them with 21 trees. I don't have a clear answer of how many of the existing trees are staying.
I think we've got about 3 trees on that one corner, and those are being retained. On our property, unfortunately, there are no trees being retained.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other question? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. So I had some questions in regards to the soil as well, because 27 inches of soil, to me, when I read the report, I went, oh, 27 inches for the roots of a 45-foot tree. That doesn't really seem like a lot to me. So I was happy to hear the explanation. But I did go and look on the Gary Oak Ecosystems Recovery Team website, because of course Gary Oaks are very near and dear to us in Oak Bay, and I know that you're removing 9, I believe, on your property. Is that correct?
Don't have that tree inventory with me here right now, but
8 or 9.
I was thinking 8.
8 or 9,
Yeah.
okay. So I went and looked on their website, and some of the things that I pulled from their website about the Gary Oak trees was when you're planting Gary Oak trees, because of course I look with interest on your plan, and especially on the Bowker Avenue side, I believe it's Site D is going to be a Gary Oak tree.
Yes.
Yes. So it says, protect your tree from soil compaction in its root zone, as well as from stress or damage from parked cars, swimming pools, or construction projects. Don't pave under the tree. Tree roots extend out at least as far as the branches of the tree, and the ground beneath the canopy should be protected from disturbance. The older the tree, the more important its shallow roots are, and the less able it is to adapt to change. So I was, again, confused, because I'm thinking, well, when I'm looking at that, and they are supposed to be the experts on Gary Oaks, how does that mesh with what you're actually doing in that site?
Well, it's a great question. The thing that's different is that when you have a large tree and you do modifications around it, you change things like the amount of oxygen. So we compact the soils, we pave it, we compact it. There's no air for the roots, and the roots die. Or we change the hydrology, so we don't have the water supply going to it. We cut it off. We put it in a drain. When you take a small tree and we give it these resources and we give it that environment, it's okay that it's paved around it. The soil isn't going underneath that paving. And where the soil is under paving, we've got a structural soil cell. So it's a plastic. You can park, just to give you an idea how strong these structural soil cells are, you put a fire truck on them. And so what you do is you create a structural element that the soil underneath it doesn't get compacted. So we're creating an environment where that young tree can thrive. And if we just went and put in a little tree and then paved all around it and gave it 1 square meter of soil, it would never amount to anything. It would just go so high, it hits the wall, it can't do anything. Yeah.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I also listened with interest about the whole root system, because I know in front of my house there's a very large plane tree, and the roots from the plane tree actually touch my foundation. So I'm wondering how you are going to stop the roots of these trees from going into the road and getting into our sewer system or our pipes that are in the middle of the road. So is there a way that is there something that you're doing that avoids that?
We can. I mean, the different trees root differently. So the plane trees, things like cherry trees, like a lot of times when we see cherry trees in sidewalks, the sidewalks are all doing this. It's because cherries are really shallow rooting, and oaks tend not to be. Oaks tend to go deeper, and so they're not pushing up. It's interesting because you would think that underneath the road would be dry, but with capillary action, water actually comes up, and when they peel off, so there's actually a lot of water there, and the roots go for it, and especially cherry roots. So we can put up root barriers on edges. We've done it where we've done like a pond liner along the edge of the road, so that we've done it with rain gardens. I haven't done it with trees, but it could be something that we looked at and do. So there are options to protect infrastructure like that.
Thank you. And my last comment would be, I appreciate the time and energy that you have put into this, and it looks like it's a very good design. I still really struggle with the 9 trees that are coming down, because those trees are anywhere from, I would say, 45 to 60 feet tall, would you say? And I think the building is going to be about 50 feet tall, about-ish. So those trees are about as tall as the building's going to be there. And I struggle because the new trees going in, how many years is it going to take for them to get to be that tall? And so the loss of those trees is problematic for me. And yeah, but I do appreciate the design that you've come with. I think it's a very good design. If this proposal goes ahead, I'm sure it'll be wonderful. But for me, I still, as I say, I struggle with the 8 or 9 trees that we're losing. So, but thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the issues that were in the reports, either for Mr. Murdoch or staff? Councillor Kirby, please.
I just had one more question for our staff. I wanted to ask about the trees that are on the boulevard currently. It appears like they aren't on the property; they're on the boulevard. Am I correct in understanding that they're municipal? Are they municipal trees, or are they trees that belong to the developer?
Councillor Kirby, I think some of them are shared trees. If you're
Okay.
referring to the oaks that are
Yes,
up towards Oak
on
Bay.
Cadboro Bay Road.
Yes. So shared trees. I think one may be ours. I haven't done the exact boundary check, but some are shared, and most are private.
Okay, so could I do a follow-up question then? I'm just going through and kind of I've counted the labels of oak along Cadboro Bay Road, and actually of the whole property on the off-site plan that's provided here as attachment 3 that I was referring to earlier, and it appears to me that there are 6 oaks that are coming down, and there are 3 remaining that are not on their property, that they're on they border. So I've heard 8, I've heard 9, I'm seeing 6. I'm just wondering if someone could clarify just how many of those oaks that exist are going to be brought down, and how many will remain? Because that was my understanding, there was some being left, and I think that's those 3 that are on the corner that are labeled 189, because there's a...
Those are being, those are the ones that are remaining.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not on your property, but they're still part of the canopy, included in the canopy calculations, because they share, they see no boundaries.
Yeah, I don't know that they were actually, I think the other tree might have created that canopy. I don't think we were using those trees to...
As a calculation?
As a calculation.
Right, it's all from that 105-year-old. Is that what that means, 105? Or is that the diameter? Okay, sorry.
Sorry, that would be
I
the
assumed
diameter.
that was the age.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that would be
sorry.
the diameter, yes.
Okay, so So the diameter of these trees, so the ones that are remaining, the 20, the 25, and the 40, can you compare that to what will be planted, just so we have an idea of what those will, how big will they grow to? Do you have an estimate?
Those ones that are remaining?
The ones that are remaining are 20, 25, and 40. And then the ones you're planting, I mean, I just, with the size of the soil cells, you said that they can grow as much as they have soil, right? So you're providing as much soil as, so they could be 100-year trees, and how big would that be?
We're thinking that they would be enough that in, say, 50 to 60 years, they'd be about a foot in diameter. And then, you know, I could see maybe a foot and a half in diameter, so 450 millimeters as being, you know, kind of the size we'd be looking at. I mean, there are trees that are quite a bit larger that are in urban areas, and they're exploiting some of those areas underneath roadbeds and things like that. So, you know, we don't know exactly how big, but we're getting them to a quite a decent size.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Another question, Councillor
Yeah,
Braithwaite.
just sorry, I just forgot that I wanted to clarify something that I think Councillor Murdoch brought up. The plan that you're showing, that plan as it stands right now, tomorrow, if it was put in, that would get 20% of coverage, or in 50 years it would be 20% coverage?
Well, I think our calculation was that we'd be more than the 20% coverage with those soil volumes, and it would be in that sort of 50-ish
50
years.
years.
Yeah.
But going in,
Going in,
initially,
no.
So,
And
because I think that's a big clarification
Yeah.
that people need to understand, that it's not overnight that we see the 20% coverage. It's in up to 50 years that we'll see 20+%
Yeah.
coverage. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any other questions with respect to the report that's before us.
Move receipt.
Moved.
Seconded.
Seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. And as I said at the outset, given that this is our... You're opposed to receiving the report? Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure you understood the nature of the motion. It was just a formal reception that, for the record. So Councillor Braithwaite is opposed. What I had said earlier was that because this is the last and only meeting between now and of council now and the public meeting, if there were any other questions, I know I have one, and I believe Councillor Murdoch has one, or any issues that you wanted to deal with, this would be a good time to do it. The applicant is here with one staff member, and of course Mr. Murdoch is still here. So Councillor Murdoch, why don't you lead off?
Mr. versus Councillor Murdoch thing is confusing. Yeah, so what I was going to raise here was just the issue of the balloon study. I know it was raised in my absence when I was off traveling, and determined by council not to do it, and probably a decision I would have agreed with. I'm not a big fan of balloon studies as a whole. However, it's come to my attention through Facebook and a couple of other pieces of correspondence flying around that there's at least one, if not more than one, groups or conjoined groups of residents that are planning on doing a balloon study themselves. They're going to be putting up balloons to mark the edges of the building and the height of the building and so forth. And my concern with that, of course, is that it's fraught with difficulties. We can't rely on it for accurate information. It has runs the realm of possibility that people seeing it, if they're too high, people get an unreasonable fear and so forth of what's coming. If they're too short, it's not accurate. You know, we can't really use it to make decisions, but we're going to be held accountable to the public for that. You know, because they're going to be seeing that as a representation. So I'm a little concerned about that. I don't think we can stop anybody from doing that. They'd be on public land and they'd be quite within their rights to do it. But I think that this may just be enough reason for us to sort of step in and make sure that the work being done is accurate. So I wanted to just bring forward to council a motion to request that the applicant and staff undertake a balloon study of the site prior to the May 3rd meeting so that it's done properly, the residents don't have to go out of their way to do this, and that we can actually use that information to guide it. I appreciate that they're not the best mechanisms. People tend to get a little inflamed when they see them. I didn't like it that much we did it with the Oak Bay Lodge, but I also just recognize that I'd rather see the real information and use it, and we can weigh that as council within the context of all the other information we have. We have excellent 3D model, we have an excellent views from the street and so forth generated through the CAD programs, but I think that if this is going to be done, I'd rather see it with accurate information than not. So I'd like to, well, I guess I'll just make the motion, we can talk to it, to make a motion that council direct staff and the applicant to erect balloons outlining the street adjacent walls and height for public display sometime between now and May 1st.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. We should probably inquire a little bit of staff. I don't know if you've had a chance to think about the feasibility, the cost, or anything like that. And also, I think maybe Mr. Thomason may have been here with other balloon studies. Is that something that the municipality got involved in at the time, or was that something the developer actually did? And I think the only other balloon study I think was the Hamilton, which I'm not sure went ahead, in fact, but that was a little bit before my time.
Yeah, when through you, Chair, when the Oak Bay Lodge did the balloon study, that was the developer leading that entirely. Staff weren't involved at all.
Okay, and to your knowledge, have we ever as a municipality been involved in doing that? Because it's really not our application.
No, you said there was two projects, possibly a Hamilton. I wasn't here for the Hamilton. I don't know that they did one there that I can recall.
Okay. Now, let's see if there's any comments or questions. This one here says that we would be responsible. Do we have any idea of if we can have the capacity? Do we have the staff? How much does this cost?
If I may clarify, it says staff and the applicant together to work on it. So if that is 99% applicant and 1% staff, that would be fine as well. I'm not dictating the specifics of that.
Well, we'd probably want to know what our obligations are under something like this. Can staff kind of direct their minds to any of those issues that I raised? Ms. Koenig, you're...
I haven't been
Pulling the
involved in
microphone.
any of these, but it would strike me that it's not something that is our area of expertise, and I'm not sure that we even have the staff capacity to kind of go out and do this. So I would suggest that if this is something that council wants, we have to kind of take that back, do a little bit more analysis on it, or that you ask the applicant to take that on.
And on that former point about you taking it back, there isn't really any other meetings where you can take it back and then inform us. So that may not be a viable alternative. All right, questions and comments? Councillor Ney, please.
I guess, even if this were to be done, how would that preclude citizens doing their own balloon study anyways? And how would anybody know the difference between what some citizens proposing to do and what if the staff or the applicant did that? I guess that's to you, Councillor Murdoch, through you, Chair.
My assumption here would be that it would be done, I think the reason that the residents want to do is they want to get some sense of what the scale of it is in real life across from them or around them. So I don't think they would do it. I mean, we couldn't preclude them from doing it, but my preference here is I think if we do it officially so we know that the information is accurate, then I think everybody would be satisfied. I think it would be to address the concerns of people who may think that it's too big to have it see it in real life and know that the numbers are accurate that are being displayed.
Okay. Any other points people want to make? No? Councillor Murdoch.
Well, I don't feel comfortable necessarily directing an applicant to do this without at least giving him, the applicants a chance to just to talk to it. I know it's a bit of an ask, it's a bit of a rush to get it in here, but I do think I'd rather have information than have it left undone or have inaccurate information prior to the meeting if possible. And I'd be very happy to amend my motion to just direct the applicant to do it prior to the meeting, but I would probably think it's fair in this case to invite the applicant to come forward and at least address council. If it's
Okay.
appropriate.
Yes, we can ask Mr. Miller or one of his staff members to come forward, but just before, as he's doing that, I certainly would be loath to have our staff involved. When applications come before us, that, the studies that are required in order to get changes in the bylaw and are really this information from the developer, our staff can certainly check it later, but for us to kind of be proactive in that, I think it's quite a different philosophy than we've had in the past, and it may be that other applicants come forward and say, well, staff, we'd like you to do this traffic study, noise study, balloon study, and I think if we go down that road, I think that needs a lot more thought as to us undertaking certain information gathering steps. So I certainly, the way it's worded now, which involves our staff, I could not support it. It's and
I'm happy to move an amendment then to strike the word staff and, so it would read that council will direct the applicant to erect balloons outlining the, et cetera.
okay, just before you make that, I'm not sure we're in a position to direct them as such, but we could request them. That because we don't have a requirement in our bylaws for this kind of thing, and we would only, I would think, I don't know if Ms. Koenig or Mr. Jones can say, do we have the power to require it? I suppose at the end of the day we have ultimate power, but
I would advise that it's probably more appropriate for you to request
all right.
to direct.
Okay.
Then I will make the motion to amend my motion to read that council request the applicant to erect balloons, et cetera. So just to strike the words direct staff
Second.
and.
Okay, so it's moved, and has it been seconded, the amendment? Okay. Let's just take a vote on the amendment so we know what motion that we have before us. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Oh, Councillor Crofts opposed to the amendment. Okay. The motion passes, so it is, the motion is a request to the applicant to do this. So I'm going to ask the applicant to come forward and speak to this.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council.
You're Mike Miller, and you live in what municipality?
My name is Mike Miller, President of Abstract Developments. Live at 644 Beach Drive in Oak Bay.
Thank you.
I guess through you, Your Worship, probably clarification would be helpful. So, is the because I know it was brought up in the meeting, the one of the last meetings that unfortunately we just missed by a few moments. We were unable to pick up the commentary, and the technical video was a couple weeks delayed, so we couldn't watch it in real time. And then it was also brought up in another meeting a few weeks prior to that, where Mr. Demant from Cascade Architecture spoke on behalf of that. Unfortunately, he's not in the country to speak to this tonight. So if I could better understand the intent of the question, perhaps I could comment.
I suppose the mover might be able to provide that background.
Okay.
I feel myself finally advocating for something I'm not a big fan of, but the
Well, me too.
The goal would be to just essentially, according to standard practices, outline the height and the dimensions along the two roads of the building with balloons, so that, as I understand it, the underside of the balloons demark the sort of the height and the corners of the building as it's going to be built, to give people on the street a sense of where the top of the building is and where the edges of the building are relative to the streetscape.
Gotcha. So it's height primarily that's the question. If I'm sorry to be technical, I'm just trying to it's
Right,
the height.
so to mark the edge of the building and the height of the building.
Okay, all right. I catch myself a little bit off guard here because I in the 18 years I've been doing this, I actually have no familiarity whatsoever with balloon studies. In fact, I've heard such things, but I've never been involved in any of them thus far. So, first step would be it'd be hard for me to commit to something without having any understanding of what that would be. For one, or what it would take to derive that information by, I think you said, May the 1st. Second point would be, while I understand height, an important question for clarity, the most accurate way to measure height, once again, I'm not a balloon expert, so I'm just trying to probably speak to the intent relative to technical data, would be survey geodetic elevation meters above sea level. So what we did was, in previous correspondence through staff to yourselves, we provided the height of adjacent buildings relative to our building and the variance to that, which is by far the most accurate way of measuring. So we didn't have the information with us tonight, and unfortunately I apologize. But for example, the building on Cadboro Bay to the west of us, we were, going off memory, respectfully, about half a floor above that. And that primarily speaks to the way in which older apartment buildings were built with lower ceiling heights, usually only 8 foot clear. Newer buildings are generally 9 foot clear, and then also thicker floor systems now, and also a lot of times they were compressed into the ground a little bit, primarily due to the building code of the day. So if I'm going off memory, say half a floor, say 4 to 5 feet, going just once again off memory, if one person was to imagine a person standing on the building adjacent to our building on the west side, that would give the most accurate way to depict a height. I'm 6 feet, but I'd be happy to stand on the roof of that building to depict exactly how high that is. Actually, I'm a little shorter than 6 feet, so I'm exaggerating a bit here. But that would be the most accurate way. And once again, I don't know the information, so I can't speak that intelligently to it. But I know Mr. DeMant, going off memory, in a couple meetings ago, spoke to the height of once again, geodetic elevation is very exact, and it needs to be surveyed by law and stamped. Whereas a balloon can represent a height, but it doesn't talk anything about contextual fit nor architectural expression. So if you took a building that is 4 stories high and literally built a big box, let's say you did that, it would definitely appear taller than that of a building that had an architectural design or stepping or animation to that effect. So I think his comment was something to the effect that it can be a little bit misleading of what a height actually does, and that's why I was maybe suggesting sitting down with staff, and I know we can do this because we do have the information, and clarifying what an accurate representation would be relative to the roof height of our building to something that actually is sitting there in real life that is documented. Sorry, that was a long answer. I apologize.
No, that's fair. Any follow-up?
And I take your point. I mean, balloons have the problem that they get blown around and become lower than they actually are, and there are advantages that they exist at the corner of the building, not 35 feet back where the existing building is, and so forth, right? So there's that existence within the actual framework to outline that. Your points are well made. There's pros and cons to this. I'm not a huge fan. I agree. They tend to highlight the boxy nature as opposed to the articulation that's provided. I think from council's perspective, we are the ones who ultimately have to make the decision on this, and we have all the tools available to us to look at, to understand that in that context, and to look at it, as part of the overall picture in terms of the drawings and the models and everything else. Those are, in my mind, more valuable than the balloon piece. My concern here is primarily that, and perhaps the way forward here is to speak with some of the neighbors that are planning on doing this and working with them, because they think they probably got a fair way down this path already, just to make sure that those heights are accurate. And they would be accurate. I mean, the building height to geodetic is
100%.
very, I mean, that's not
100%.
Not that difficult to do.
And that
Jim.
actually forms part of the, sorry to interrupt you, that forms part of the development the development permit and the zoning, so that it cannot be higher than that, which is what approved in the plans through the staff. And if it does, it requires a variance. Two things to your point. I think you're referring to Facebook Oak Bay Local. I've been sort of brought up to speed with some of the communications around that Facebook. I unfortunately am not following that particular page, and now is probably not the best time for me to join that page. So I've decided to forego my Facebook friend adding. However, you do bring up a point. There is inaccurate information out there, which we've been asked to provide more accurate information. So we've done that and started to circulate that. And the couple of neighbors, which I not, without prejudice, I'm not sure that I'm identifying the right ones, but I did on more than one occasion try to reach out to those people to talk about specific things. So if height's a big concern for those people, I know shadow is as well. I've offered the opportunity to try to sit down with, particularly, I think we're referring to the neighbors on Bowker, to try to dig in technical data that may or may not satisfy them, but at least they have the accurate information, because you are very correct. There's a lot of inaccurate information.
So again, that would just be, the goal here would be to ensure that what would be a very public display is accurate. Essentially, that's the intent here, would be just to, if it's coming anyway, I'd rather it be accurate, because I think it's a dangerous thing. If it's too high and it inflames people, then that's a problem. We have the capacity as a group to recognize it in context, but I think it's important for us that if this is going to happen, that we have it done right and don't have it sort of misinformation flying around out there. Like I said, I'm not a fan of these things, but if it's going to happen, I'd much rather have accurate information than not, and then we can use that information as appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Miller? Okay. I don't. Oh yes, Councillor Croft, please.
Well, this is actually a question for staff. Does anybody on staff actually have any experience with balloon studies and the results of balloon studies when we're talking about accuracy? Because my experience of the own balloon study that I've seen in my career was the one at the Oak Bay Lodge, and it seemed to overstate the height of the building because you put red balloons in the sky. People don't know whether they're supposed to look at the bottom, the middle, or the top. So it does tend to make it look larger than what you will end up with in an architecturally designed building that is designed for the site. So I'm just wondering if anybody has had any other experience that can relate to a balloon study.
Let's start with Mr. Thomason. How long have you been in the business? Have you ever seen it?
No, Oak Bay Lodge was the only one.
And how long have you been in the business?
28 years.
Okay. Ms. Jensen?
No, in all the applications I've been involved with, along with other departments, I've never seen anybody do a balloon study.
And how many years have you been involved?
Do I really have to answer that?
You can just give us an approximation. Well, if you would prefer, just hold up the number of fingers so the people at home won't know. And is there a zero behind that?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Good. So there you have it. Okay, any other points people want to make? I've got some points I want to make. So thanks, Mr. Miller, but I don't think there's any questions
Thank
of
you.
staff. Councillor Braithwaite, do you, just before you go, no questions from Mr. Miller?
No,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to say that I think that Councillor Murdoch has a good point in that I don't want to see the misinformation out there. If we're going to have misinformation, then it's going to be hard for at the public hearing for people to come that are coming up and saying that they're relying on this study to make their decision on whether or not they feel that this project should go ahead. That's wrong. I want them to have the correct information. I think Mr. Miller is correct in that the information that he's putting forward, we understand sitting around the table, but for the general person out there in the community, they perhaps don't understand how to work those numbers. So I just wish we could have something that would show them in an accurate way, and I think it's better to come from the applicant than from the residents around there.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Okay, I'm going to say a few things. We have the accurate information. Well, I won't put those two numbers together that we heard from experience, but it's more than 40 years of experience in this business, and it's never been done. It's been done once at the Oak Bay Lodge. I don't think it was much of a success there. I think it's us encouraging very inaccurate and potentially misleading information by passing this motion. We can call forward other buildings which we know the height of, and we know the height of the next door buildings. We know the height of ones on the other side. We can find the heights of other buildings that have been built. That's much more accurate, and that's where we should put our trust, not in some. I would almost think it's a bit of a gimmick, and it feels like a lot of those balloons they put on used car lots just to get people's attentions. This isn't science. This is we have the science, and I think we should rely on that. So I can't support directing a developer to do this. We'd have to direct all developers to do that. Why just this one? So I can't support that. If Mr. Miller wants to work with the neighbors, that's up to him. But we as a council, I don't think should be asking him to do that. Okay. Any other points? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Croft, Councillor Kirby, Councillor Nay, and myself opposed. Thank you. The motion fails. I had a question, and that had to do with the setbacks and the amount of public space. On prior occasions, Mr. Miller, and if you wouldn't mind coming to the front, I had concerns about the public space and on the Bowker side. But as I continue to examine the plans, I'm trying to get a better idea of what the public space along Cadboro is and whether it's sufficient. And on the weekend, for instance, I had coffee at Ottavio's, and we came down the stairs, and we didn't turn right, we turned left, where the sidewalk is very wide. There was two groups of people standing and chatting. That would never happen in front of Ottavio's itself, which is only a 3 or so foot wide sidewalk. I want to ensure that if this project does proceed, that it is a space where people want to spend time and not rush past, much like they do in front of the Bell Block and a few others. So we're trying to create a livable, a walkable, enjoyable community. So does that require us to move the first story back in order to achieve that space? Or can you give us some kind of assurance that what we have now is sufficiently wide for people with maybe child carriages? What are they used to be called baby carriages, but I don't know what they're called these days.
Bugaboos.
Stroller.
Strollers, but the bigger ones. And so they can stop, they can chat, other people can walk past them without having to step into the traffic. That's the kind of community I want to live in. And we've seen very good examples. People are hanging out all the time in the front of Penny for a variety of reasons, but part of which is there's nice space there. There's space where you want to stop and chat and create that community setting. So would it require pulling the first story back, or what have you got to say on that issue?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess before I have an opinion on that, but what I thought I would do for the benefit of council, mayor and council, was to provide a comparable data that we have accurate information on, much for the very same reasons that we just talked about with the height. We have in plan view, the renderings are representative of finished building, but plan view is 100% accurate. So what I've done is I've put together a small package that, if I may, through staff, circulate to yourselves, and then just quickly run through it.
Okay.
And then
you
I
have
might.
Copies for all of us here?
Yes, sir.
That would be helpful.
No, nothing formal here. Just pass it along.
That's fine.
It's very safe.
All right, and what you provided for us is a picture of the Cadboro Bayside, or artist rendering, I should say, a document called SK.35.1, and then another document which says sidewalk width on it. Okay.
Sorry, I have a short one, apologize. So what, I'll just quickly run through the various documents, and then what I'll do is I'll circle back. So the first page, storefront view, artist rendering of the Cadboro Bay side, and it's an artist representation of it, computer rendering, and this would have been previously included in correspondence to yourselves. The next page is a plan view of the Cadboro Bay and catching a little bit of the Bowker side. This is an older document, so the Bowker side, just to be clear, has been changed to a wider sidewalk now. So the Bowker side has since changed, which has been updated at staff level. We just were able to get this for tonight's meeting. And then I also got the working drawings from a similar project on Oak Bay Avenue, which is on the third page. So what I'll just maybe go to the third page, if I may. The building face. So every project has nuances or sightings or road widths or anything like that. So all I can do is go to something that's accurately comparable. The building face at Village Walk along Oak Bay Ave, from the building face to the vehicular parking, is 4.050 meters, or 13.3 feet. Okay. Then if we go to the second page, the Bowker frontage is 17.5 at the west end and 18 feet at the east end, pardon me. And so as it starts to round the corner, this is another drawing you've seen before. The blue line outlines the current commercial building and its setbacks, which is zero lot line. And then the gray area, the light gray, represents the pedestrian realm, if you will. So that's where you can see that we maintain sort of 18 feet along the Cadboro Bay frontage from building face to edge of parking sidewalk, which would be a direct comparable experience. So I reluctantly didn't do the percentage wise, but essentially it's going from 13 foot 3 inches on Oak Bay Avenue to 18 foot even to Bowker. Sorry, to Cadboro Bay side. And then the artist rendering just represents kind of what that look and feel would look like.
All right. When I look at this, I did some measurements some time ago in that area, and right in front of the Clive. That was 9 feet. So from the edge of, from if you can take page 2, which is the SK35-1, that's approximately the distance. If we can look at the bulged out planter, just to the left of the word sidewalk in red. From that planter to the planter, which is closer to the building, is 9 feet, which is about the same as the front of the Clive.
And I actually, we actually did provide that exact information. I'm just going to refer to. Do you have it? Okay. May I grab it?
Oh, absolutely.
So I actually have the Clive sidewalk in front of me, actually. Cascadia was also the architects that did the Clive. and you're from a previous document that's been circulated to yourselves is exactly 9 feet.
And if council, and maybe this is a joint question to you and staff, if at the public hearing, council feels that 9 feet is not sufficient, is it possible to pull the planters next to the building back to increase that size? Because that seems to be in the various places the limiting factor, and by pulling that back. So first of all, is that I assume that's physically possible.
Yeah. So I've had some time to think about this prior to this evening, and what's actually not shown on the last page, on Oak Bay Avenue, is we actually added planters and benches for that exact reason, that we felt when it was completed, it felt very too vast. So we put 2 sets of planters and benches outside of the 2 retail spaces on Oak Bay Ave, and then tables and such as you sort of get closer to the corner for that exact reason. However, I think to answer your question in a long-winded way, one thing that could be done is the planters could form part of a development variance permit or be removed from the plan, and I think staff may have the ability to delegate that at a staff level under softscape, and I would probably ask staff through yourselves.
Well, and that's going to be my question. Is that something that needs to be nailed down at a public hearing? If we don't agree with this, because this seems to be a fairly small part of the issue, overall issues. Can that be done subsequent to a public hearing? Those kind of adjustments? I don't know who's best to answer that, Ms. Jensen?
Sorry, just to clarify, Your Worship, so you're looking at moving the planters?
Widening that sidewalk, and there's a number of different ways I suppose you can do it without moving the building.
So if you're not talking about adjusting the building, then that would simply go forward to be dealt with at the development permit,
Okay.
which council would consider upon adoption of a zoning bylaw.
Okay, so that helps me understand, 1, the width and comparables, and 2, what the process may have to be if that's not satisfactory to us. All right, Councillor Braithwaite, Councillor Kirby, and then Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm just wondering, if we removed those planters, would that not then take away from the coverage, the canopy coverage?
No, it's not so much, if you look at the ones to the right of the red sidewalk, if you look at those 2 planters, creating a wider space there, so pulling it back, or maybe cutting in at the street side planter, and then reducing slightly the other planter, the one to the left of them. It's just trying to make it feel like a place you want to go to and hang out, essentially. If you have a coffee, would you be comfortable standing in that area chatting? Okay, so was that your question? Okay.
And I've also confirmed that with the landscape architect that these particular planters were not included in the calculation for the tree canopy.
Okay. Councillor Kirby, please.
So I'm just wanting to make sure I'm understanding exactly what you're saying, and I think this is the easiest image to use, this rendering of the storefront view of Cadboro Bay Road. So you're talking about these planters that are back here with the kind of grasses in them, probably like a rain garden kind of style?
Yep, just where that cyclist is, then behind the cyclist there's a tree, and it was a distance that person leaning up against the inner planter and the woman walking by with a stroller, and her child also has a stroller.
Could I add a suggestion? Like, I thought you meant moving the planters with the trees in them further out and creating more space for those trees to potentially grow larger. Like, maybe there's a negotiation that could take place between the district and the applicant that could increase the volume of soil volumes for those trees in the street, so that they can reach a capacity much beyond what's there now. I mean, so that this bumps out. When you said bump out, I thought you meant bump out into the road, and sharing the road space with, because it is a very ample road allowance, I believe, that there would be room for, because there's room for parking, there's room for a bike lane, there's room for easily 2 lanes of traffic. I think it's wide enough to allow for more space for the trees. So if that could be negotiated, I would think that would be a much more pleasant space as well. Like, I agree with you that having a wider sidewalk does create people space and makes it far more interesting for the pedestrian.
Okay. I heard Ms. Jensen say that is a detail that can be worked out and ironed out after the hearing and after the zoning is done.
That's correct. We would be looking at landscaping as part of the development permit.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything else then? No?
No, I
Councillor?
just wanted to see if that was a possibility that
Sounds like it
that
is.
it could be negotiated, as well as, ensuring that the bike lane exists, but leaving room for more tree space. I think we've heard tonight how important the largeness of the soil cell is to the success of the tree and the longevity of the tree. And I'd like to see these trees be 100 years or more. So that would be a goal I think we should strive for.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch, please.
I think my questions were answered. I would just
Okay.
point
Thank
out that all of these pieces that we're talking about, the trees planting, the sidewalks, the jump outs, they're all municipal property. 100%, we can do whatever we want to it, frankly, over the time. The difficulty here is that there's no setback to the building, so we can't ask anything of the applicant to shift things around.
Okay.
That's
a
the
good point.
problem.
Okay, I see nothing else on this point. Is there any points anyone else wants to raise at this point? Okay, no, it doesn't seem to be. Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
And thank you. So we've one other issue?
Yeah, just a question, maybe it is for the applicant, actually. My understanding was the revised three-dimensional model that was out there was going to include some human figures on it as well. Is that coming before the public hearing?
I'm happy to throw myself on it right now. No, actually, there were some inaccuracies with the building form when it was a request of mayor and council, and I can't remember the committee of the whole. We quickly got it together. We literally had it hot off the press the day it showed up in Hall, and we saw some inconsistencies in it. So we actually just got it back again today. I believe we've checked it for accuracy. No? We've checked it for accuracy now. And it's really a context model. It's not architecturally exact. And before it just had too many inconsistencies. We didn't feel comfortable, so we shipped it back off. And then that's when council requested us bring it back. So we quickly put it together, and today it showed up.
So that's good. So are there going to be some human figures on that to give it this for a sense of scale?
No, however, I'm sure that's something that we could probably order from Vancouver and get it shipped here and apply it if that's council's wish.
I would certainly like to see that just as a measure of, I appreciate it's more of a context, but that context includes the scale. So I'm not sure the rest of the council feels about that. I believe that was a request they made originally.
For humans to be there?
For there be human figures in the model.
Oh, okay, I don't recall that, but I may have missed that. But there'll be Vancouver human figures, so they're going to be a very different style dress and clothes, maybe even. Okay, I'm going to leave that to Mr. Miller to decide. There's nothing else then? Okay, so we've dealt with this issue.
Is it better to make it as a motion then?
Well, unless Mr. Miller's going to take it under advisement and in good faith, if you want to require him to have humans, it seems to me a detail that, do we determine how many humans, how tall they should be? It is
Not
kind
quite
of
6
drilling
feet. I think
down
that's
an
my
awful
interest
lot.
as well.
Perhaps I understand the request clearly. Perhaps what we'll do is we'll reach out to AB Models tomorrow morning, and maybe we could just report back through to staff, and staff could then communicate it to you. So we'll find out what's appropriate, what's available, how quickly we can get it, and we'll courier them in and stick them on. So if you wish, Your Worship, certainly you could do a motion, but we understand, and we'll do our very best tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Murdoch, do you wish to have a motion based on what you've just heard?
No, I think if they're making
Okay.
their best efforts to get that in
That's
here.
good.
Just before the May 3rd meeting, I think it'd be the appropriate time. But the earlier the better, because people are going to be coming by to look at it over the course of the next week or so.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that exhausts everything on that issue, because we've already had that motion. We'll move on to item number 7. This is a Federation of Canadian Municipalities request for a legal defense fund. This is above and beyond our our fees that are required, and the recommendation here is for us to supply that money, $435.06, and this is a report by Mr. Jones. Can we just kind of get a sense of what good will come of this and the basis of your recommendation?
Thank you, Your
Please.
Worship. So, as Council knows, we are a member of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and 90% of municipalities in Canada are members of the Federation, and they do have what they call a voluntary fund, a legal defense fund, and the intent of that fund is to fund defenses or intervening or to become intervening status in various cases that impact municipalities as a whole, so they don't take on cases to advance the interests of an individual municipality, but if there is a case that they feel could impact municipalities across Canada, then they may intervene in that, or in some instances take on an issue on its own. So for what they are asking municipalities to do is to contribute 2 cents per person in the community towards that legal defense fund. It is voluntary. From my particular perspective, it's particularly beneficial to smaller communities that don't have necessarily the ability to intervene in cases or advance cases on their own. So a community like ours, personally, for $430, this is a good investment, in staff's opinion.
I would move that the District of Oak Bay contribute $435.06 to the FCM Legal Defense Fund.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion? Okay, I guess that's another way for each and every one of our citizens to give their 2 cents worth. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed, thank you very much. I thought I'd get that out before Steve did. Preempting. Number 8 is Councillor Croft, were you, sorry, were you going to say?
I will need to excuse myself for the discussion on the
yes.
Homefulness Society. Thank you.
Okay. And before you go, I think you need to state on the record the basis of that.
I acted for the Homefulness Society and their representatives when they purchased the farm.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are being asked by Richard LeBlanc, founder and executive director of Creating Homefulness Society. He's writing to us and asking for a letter of support to the ALC, Agricultural Land Commission, to assist their efforts to contribute to the solution in the CRD of homelessness. I think I might just comment on this before we kind of get too deep into it. This is an arm's length commission that makes these determinations. We don't have anything before us from the commission as to what their factors are. I think for us to be fair to the commission and fair to the Central Saanich and fair to this society, we would need a staff report to tell us which direction, what the impacts of various directions. I note with interest that the district of Saanich, Central Saanich, is even taking a kind of avoiding that as an issue and just asking the Agricultural Land Commission, although they call this the, they ask the ALC to judge the relative merits of the proposed plan. They, being the home jurisdiction for this particular piece of property, haven't come out one way or another. They've essentially said, ALC, you make a decision. And if you make a decision, this is what we'd like. So for us as an outsider to go above and beyond that, I really don't think it's our jurisdiction. But that's just my 2 cents worth on that issue. So if there's agreement, I think we're in a position to receive this.
Move receipt.
If that's, I'm okay with the receiving. I think if we wanted to make a more, wanted to make more of a little statement around it, we could make a motion just to support the District of Central Saanich in their application, which would be entirely neutral and leave it to their pieces. But I think this probably achieves essentially the same thing without actually going through any of this wordiness. So.
Okay. And on that, I mean, I think it's a valid point, but I think we would need more information as to what drove their position in this. So, any other discussion? This is a motion to receive. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Go on to the Oak Bay Heritage Commission. These are minutes of their 14th of March meeting. Yes, please.
Receipt.
Do ask Councillor Croft to come back in. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to receive the Heritage minutes of the 14th of March.
Move receipt.
Okay, yes. We already have a motion on the floor. This is just to receive them once and for all. This is okay, discussion, all in favor, opposed, none opposed. Correspondence in the upcoming items. We don't have any in there. Thank you very much. New business. I don't have a report from the Capital Regional District. Other verbal reports before I'm going to do new business at the end of these verbal reports. Okay. Yes, go ahead, please.
I just want to do an update on the Yes Awards, if I might.
Absolutely.
Thank you for all the councillors who are going to be in attendance to the Yes Awards on May 10th. I just want to let you know that I did extend an invitation to the Lieutenant Governor, and she will be in attendance at the event. So we're really looking forward to that. So thank you very much.
Oh, that's great. That'd be an honor for the Yes Awards and an honor for our community. In fact, I was just had a cup of tea with her on Sunday celebrating the Queen's birthday. She came into the community and just a wonderful Lieutenant Governor with just boundless energy. So we appreciate her coming. Okay, anything else? Yes, Councillor Croft, please.
I'd like to bring Council's attention to the Celebrate Camas and Wildflower celebration by the Friends of Uplands Park on April 30th. It just came through in the mail today, so we need to let our friends know through the tweeter. And I'd like to thank the mayor for attending the AGM of the Community Association of Oak Bay. It was a great presentation by Stuart Stark on the importance of the heritage conservation area. Thank you.
And I tweeted it out and was complimented for creating a new hashtag, which was a first for me. The Prospect HCA is the hashtag. And we had a wonderful, that was a brilliant presentation by Stuart Stark with pictures and you get a real feel for the importance of that area. So we look forward to starting down that road. And we were graced by the presence of Councillor Madoff, who's very much an advocate for heritage. She was there in attendance to learn more. Although I think we can learn something from the City of Victoria, where I think they had about 10 HCAs. Is it 8? Okay, they had more than a larger number than we have. Thank you. Okay, anything else? Okay.
I just wanted to pass on a quick thanks to our staff members that attended on Saturday at Uplands Park for the BioBlitz, and there was also a tent there from volunteers from the David Suzuki Society promoting the butterfly gardens, and Gary Oak Ecosystem Recovery Team representatives, as well as the Friends of Uplands Park, who spend enormous amount of effort in the park, and they passed on a lot of fantastic information regarding native plantings that I'm our family is now incorporating in our yard, I hope, and I'm so impressed at every single event that the Friends of Uplands Park put on, that our staff are always there to support them, and so I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Chris Hidlay was appreciated for that, that time he spends on his weekend. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, Councillor Murdoch, back to you.
Just a real quick thank you, and Mayor, you were there for there was a library and the Heritage Foundation and Archive, sorry, are putting on these talk series through the library, and very well attended. Gene Sparks gave this one, and it was an absolutely excellent talk. If you guys ever have a chance to go out to any of them, they've all been excellent so far. Thank you.
And a very good collaborative effort between our archives, our Oak Bay Archives, Ms. Duncan, and the library branch at Oak Bay. So it's great and very well attended. Sold out. All right. So what I had, the next new business, and I'd given everyone a heads up by providing and circulating a proposed motion that I would ask councillors to put on the table, so to speak, and then we can I can speak to it and deal with it.
I would move that staff be directed to fund the capital projects listed below, the Thompson Cadboro Bay, Thompson Sidewalk, Dunlevy Alley, Thompson Estefan, for a total of $203,000 to be funded by the new Infrastructure Capital Reserve, or whatever that will be called.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. So it's on the floor. Given that it's kind of my initiative, and I appreciate the mover and the seconder for putting it in play, I think if there's no objection, I'm just going to kind of lead off with the rationale and how I work through the logic of why we should do this. And as you know, as council knows, but not everybody does in Oak Bay, we get annually from something known as the Gas Tax Fund, the GTF, we get approximately $700,000 a year, and it's money that comes from the federal government, the gas tax. It's distributed throughout Canada, and that comes to the communities without condition, without a lot of conditions. I shouldn't say completely without conditions, and it allows communities to spend it on a list of priorities. So the list of priorities they have on the websites, there's 18, and I'll get to some of them that apply to us and apply to this particular situation that I'm going to be suggesting that we support. Also, we were during the estimates, we heard from the Director of Financial Services, who in anticipation of this fall having an infrastructure and asset management report, which would give us some kind of long-term, longer-term vision of replacing various assets such as buildings and sewers and water. She suggested that we put aside the equivalent of 1% of taxes, which would be approximately $200,000, and we establish a new infrastructure reserve, and that essentially is a savings account that we would start building up over the years. We then had a motion on the 19th of April as part of the estimates where council decided to take that $700,000 we get from the gas tax fund and put it into the savings account. And so that was $700,000, which is, in my calculation, 3.5 times as much as was recommended should be in that fund, at least in the first year. Now, with that, then, this motion that is before us proposes to take $203,000 out of that reserve fund, out of the 700, still leaving approximately 500,000 in there, and use it in this budget year on essentially two what I would describe as one-time projects. One of the projects has to do with the improving the intersection at Thompson and Cadboro Bay, as well as part of that improvement, extending a sidewalk down Thompson Avenue. That's the one project. and the other is storm drain upgrade work that needs to be done on Dunlevy Alley and the Thompson Estevan area. So this falls within, and I mentioned there's a list of eligible projects, so you can't just spend it on anything you want. There is a list and includes things like public transit, but it also includes local roads and bridges and active transportation, which then includes roads and bridges in its name, but also other eligible projects such as sidewalks. So clearly the first project, which has part of a road, how can I call it, rehabilitation perhaps, and so that fits perfectly. That one project on Thompson with the road work and the sidewalk fits squarely within that particular area. There's a whole bunch of other lists which include things like short line railway. Another one is drinking water and wastewater. And within the wastewater infrastructure, eligible projects include, and they're very specific, storm water collection. So these storm drains, again, fit squarely within an eligible project heading. And there's other things like solid waste, sport infrastructure, recreation infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, disaster mitigation, and broadband connectivity. And interestingly enough, also asset management, integrated community sustainable plans, and long-term infrastructure plans. Again, something that we're working on. So these funds can be used in a variety of ways, but they fit perfectly in those four, there's actually two main projects that each have two branches. And they would have otherwise been funded by taxes. So if they were to be funded by this gas tax, we would in essence reduce the amount of taxes we have to collect by $203,000. So there are two purposes why I suggest this. One purpose is to bring the tax increase, which is currently hovering about 3.8% for an average home, bring that more in line with, I think, what people expect, and it would reduce it essentially to closer to 2.8. Now that's approximate. It could be 0.7, 0.6. But also the second purpose is not only this year, but also looking at trying to even out the tax increases due to infrastructure improvements. So if we were to save all of the money this year, we would essentially deny this year's taxpayers the advantage of some of that and essentially advantage taxpayers down the road. And I think it's fair and incumbent upon us to try to spread the cost of these over the years in a fairest way as possible. So this, I would suggest, is a fair way that we use some of this for this year to reduce the tax burden, yet we're still saving some from down the road. I also note this year we have $1.4 million grants that were given quite apart from the gas tax. Now, there is a disadvantage of doing this at this time, and the disadvantage would be that we start relying on funding from the federal government, which at some point may dry up. That is a small risk. I read from the I read from the federal government documents which describe the federal gas tax fund as permanent and predictable funding for municipalities, talking that to date $13 billion have been invested in municipalities through the fund, and there will be close to $22 billion to flow over the next 10 years. So there's a clear expectation that the monies will be for at least 10 years. So we can have this, we can rely on 700,000, give or take, for that amount of money over the next at least 10 years. And we've had it approximately 10 years in place already, if not a little more. So that I would suggest is a disadvantage, but one that carries with it very little risk. I also heard the at the estimates meeting. I'll deal with it at this point as opposed to giving a reply on the issue, and that is we're taking from Peter to pay Paul. I don't agree with that analogy. We are Peter and we are Paul, or to put it in a more of a gender neutral, we're Petra and we're Paula. We are the keeper of all the money. So it's not a matter of robbing A to pay B, because we are the same person. We are the same entity in a sense. So it is, and besides, in terms of allocating a fair tax placement, we sometimes say we're going to give group X some monies, but not group Y. So we kind of are doing that in any event. We're trying to allocate on a fair and a reasonable basis as possible. And that's why I suggest by taking the 203 of the 700 that we'll have in that reserve this year is fair. So, all right, I will recognize other speakers. Councillor Croft, please.
As a mover of the resolution, the reason I did that is that I think that we have to recognize that there are people in our community that can't react to tax increases like others. Young families, seniors on fixed income. This also does flow through to the owners of apartment buildings and commercial properties, and that puts up rents for people in our neighborhood. And we know that 27% of the people who live in Oak Bay residents are in a rental situation. The the rental increase for this year, the province has said is 3.7%. If we were to increase our taxes, we would take that completely away from the property owners, and they need that money for repairs and maintenance. So I'm continue to support, and that's why I made the motion. I did a small calculation. The difference between the 3.8 and the 2.8 is not a significant amount of money, but it is significant to people that are struggling to make their way in our community.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have a problem. I mean, we actually had this discussion at the estimates meeting in terms of where we wanted to do it. The reality is that we have a choice as council as to how much money we want to spend and so forth. And the total amount of our budget with salary increases and adding new bodies and funding some of the sort of run rate capital projects is 3.8%. That's the most accurate number we have reflected. We have capital, we have reserve funds paying portions of that we've paid into, and we're continuing to do that. The decision was to essentially recognize that we have a fairly sufficient amount of money in the upland sewage separation, but we haven't been funding adequately capital reserves for some of the big projects that we know are coming, that will come out of the infrastructure asset plan process. And so we're essentially just taking money out of that, which we know we're going to need for our assets management piece in future, to pay down our 3.8%, which is the real number, to a 2.8% number, which sounds better. And I appreciate it's all money and it all gets moved around, but I think we can all recognize that we actually have a substantial amount of money that's going to be required of us as a municipality to pay for all these infrastructure projects, many of which require large lump sums on our part to pay our third or 17% or sometimes 50% of the projects, or 100% if we don't have grants. So I'm not sure. We had the debate, we discussed it, and we all seem to agree at that point that keeping the number accurate was the right thing to do, and put the money aside for the 7 months or so it's going to take to the end of this year when we get a provisional budget and the asset management plan in place to consider if we're going to spend them on one-time projects or other major projects going forward. But to do that within the context of what the big picture is. So I don't really support this motion. I have to say, it feels very much like we're redebating something that's already been debated by council. We agreed to the budget as it was set out, and I think the number that's there right now is painful, and I think that we should recognize that fact and own it as a council without trying to move these funds around for these other projects that we have on our books. There's nothing absolutely legally that prevents us from doing that. We can take this money and move it around as we see fit. The question is, how much are we going to be setting aside for future, knowing it's going to be a big number? So really what we're doing is we're just deferring the cost to future, but we know that the cost in the hundreds of millions of dollars, not in the $200,000 range. So it seems to me beneficial for us to actually set that money aside as we need to reflect the actual operational cost increases that we're carrying on this year. And if that's too high, then we have to work harder to get those numbers down in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby, please.
I just wanted to point out that these projects are fairly small by comparison to the Upland sewage separation or the Henderson water redundancy project or anything of that size that we could apply for significant grant funding from other levels of government. So these are small projects that have to get done that aren't necessarily eligible for grant funding. So we would be footing the entire bill, whether we pay for them from an asset management plan in the future, that we would put that $700,000 in, or whether we put it into a $200,000 spend this year, fund this year. I don't think it matters. We're investing in our sidewalks, in our roads, and our storm drains, and which is part of the asset management plan. It's just taking a step now rather than waiting until we get the asset management plan later and having a fund to draw on. I don't think it has any impact on whether or not we'd receive grants from other levels of government.
Any other speakers? Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I was a bit confused with this because I also agree that we did determine at estimates that what we were going to do with this money. I think that we should own the 3.8% that we have put forward from estimates, and I don't believe that we can rely. You made a comment, Mayor, that we can rely on getting the gas tax money for years and years to come. But I don't believe that we can rely on that. I think we're at the whim of whoever is in power in the provincial government as far as that goes. And I don't know whether that will be passed down to us. So I will have to vote against the motion to stay with what we had determined at estimates.
Thank you. If I could just, Councillor Nick.
I'll just throw in my 2 bits.
Okay.
I'm going to support the motion. I think we can rely on monies coming in. I think the risk here is minimal, and this makes for me, it's not about it sounding better in a tax percentage. It's about this really does make a difference in the pocket of our taxpayers, and it seems to me it's strategic and legitimate, and we'll still take care of business at the same time.
Thank you. Just a small correction. This is federal, so not provincial. Okay? And I was reading from a federal document. And I was just, okay. And in terms of whether or not this is similar to the motion we had, this is quite different than the motion we had at the estimates. The motion we had at the estimates, the way staff understood it, was to add 200,000 to the asphalt budget. I don't think the mover and the seconder was aware of that, how staff had taken it, but there was some side table discussions which gave that impression to staff. So this is very specific. It doesn't deal with the asphalt, which I think are clearly ongoing issues, almost more of an operational. These are one-time projects which we, as Councillor Kirby said, they have to get done. And we've agreed that they have to get done. And we're in a position to spread out that pain that you referred to, Councillor Murdoch, over some years. I think it's an incumbent on us to try to do that. Anyways, Councillor Murdoch, you want to finish it off, and then we'll have a vote, please.
Sure. Well, I would just point out that in the presentation given to Council by the Director of Finance, that the proposal was, and you mentioned saying this is 3.5 times the recommended 1%. The recommendation there was look at our budget all of our costs in there, and then add 1% to that. So under that direction, it would be 3.8% plus 1% to make 4.8%. The gas tax money envisioned at that time was still going into uplands, but can really be going into any infrastructure fund to fund these large future projects. So the recommendation from staff was pay your bills, add 1% to that because we know there's a huge bill coming and deal with the gas tax as we're doing currently, which is putting it aside for infrastructure projects. What you're suggesting is diametrically the opposite, which is not put that money, not pay the 1%, and then steal another 1% out of the gas tax, not steal, that's an unfair term, but take 1% of that gas tax money to pay to reduce the tax burden by 2.8%. So it was mentioned there that this is what was intended. My reading of what was put forward as a suggestion to get on top of our long-term infrastructure costs is quite the opposite of this. In fact, it's quite a massive difference in terms of the overall. We're basically taking out $400 and some thousand less than what was recommended by the Director of Finance in her presentation to Council on estimates. So, yeah, I have a hard time supporting this given that fact.
Okay, ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite, Councillor Murdoch opposed. Thank you very much. And that staff would give you sufficient directions, and as you're putting the financial plan bylaw together, which we anticipate will be here May 8th. And then we're looking to set a special meeting sometime later that week to actually give it final reading. All right? Good. Thank you very much. If I would just go back on my iPad to our... All right, so moving on to items 12 and 13, this is a bylaw and the setting of a, public hearing date in relation to 592 Island Road. The date being proposed is May.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I had another new business.
Oh,
item.
under new business?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we do this since we're started, and then we'll
Okay.
come back to another
Sure.
item. Is that okay, Ms. Jones? We can do it that way. Thank you. Particularly since the people have been waiting here. This has to do with 592 Island, and the recommendation is after the first two readings. We'll need a motion for that. We will set the date of May 23rd, 6 p.m. in the council chambers for that public hearing. Alrighty.
I'll move first and second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded for both readings. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Resolution. And then what resolution?
Move that a public hearing on bylaw 3531.101 be held in council chambers on May 23rd, 2017 at 6 p.m. and that notice be given in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on May 23rd, if not before. All right. Thank you very much. Now, motion for adjournment, please.
I have a notice of motion.
Oh, sorry. I do sometimes have a shorter attention span that I should have. But extra new business.
I had a notice of motion that I circulated by email to council, and I wanted to raise that tonight.
And so it's a notice of motion tonight.
For a council code of conduct, yes. Okay. And should I read the motion now, or?
Well, I think.
I circulated it
circulated
last week on Thursday. Oh dear.
Okay, well, I think we better read it out.
I can read it out.
And then this will serve as notice, and it will come back at a subsequent meeting in May, and we can debate it then. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So it's a notice of motion on council code of conduct. Whereas Oak Bay Council is committed to providing leadership and a workplace founded on the principles of respect, integrity, accountability, openness, and responsibility. And a council code of conduct may act as a reminder to this and future councils of their commitment to fulfilling their roles to the highest possible ethical standards. And therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to prepare for council consideration a council code of conduct.
Okay, so that's the notice, and then we'll bring that back on the May 8th meeting, and we'll have that debated and discussed. So I don't know what went wrong with the email.
Yeah,
maybe you left some names off.
I'll
Who
send
knows?
some further information. Maybe I supplied some other further documentation. I will circulate it again just to be sure that everybody received it.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, now notice of.
Motion for
not
adjournment.
notice of motion.
Second.
Now, motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, discussion, all in favor, opposed? Thank you very much, everybody.